Before we talk about the game and the title of the video, let's look back a bit. Crypt of the Necrodancer is an indie game created by Brace Yourself Games, a roguelike dungeon crawler where your goal is to move your character and perform actions to the beat of the music. Your protagonist is Cadence, a blonde, tough, and somewhat undead woman who seeks out a sorcerer who put a curse on her heart upon meeting her demise. The game is extremely challenging, with head-bobbing tracks that really get you into the dungeon-crawling rhythm-based gameplay. Fast forward to 2019 in June, not long after Nintendo's E3 presentation, I was waiting eagerly to buy this game with much anticipation for an awesome Necrodancer crossover, and man, did it deliver. This game is Cadence of Hyrule. Welcome to Indie Game Overcast, where we plug in our controllers and enjoy the ride. Cadence of Hyrule is a collaboration between Crypt of the Necrodancer and The Legend of Zelda. Together, the developers managed to create an epic, remix-filled puzzle adventure. If you're a fan of Zelda, you can imagine the announcement of this game raised many eyebrows. Initially, the game looks like a tribute to titles such as Link's Awakening and more so, A Link to the Past. However, various monsters, characters, weapons, and locations from throughout the series make an appearance in Cadence of Hyrule. Pair that with nothing but awesome music remixes of previous overworld and boss themes composed by Danny Baranowski, and you have a notable installment in the Necrodancer series. My favorite track has to be the Fairy Fountain theme, enhanced by amazing vocals by professional singer Adriana Figueroa. Just about every track in this game has an alternative ambient version that can be heard when you access the game's pause menu screen. Seeing as it was a runner-up for the 2019 Game Awards Best Score in Music, I think I can safely say Cadence of Hyrule has a solid OST that anyone can groove to. Visually, Cadence of Hyrule gave a sense of timelessness with its 16-bit appearance. All of the environments look colorful and stunning. Normally, I have problems with looking at bright colors for too long, but everything was pleasing, especially on the Nintendo Switch's 6.2-inch screen. It lives up to how a retro-style Zelda game should look in 2019, spin-off or not. So a brief gloss over the story. The story's pretty simple. Cadence is isekai to Hyrule, and a new character named Octavo is causing a stir in Hyrule. Cadence, Link, and Zelda team up to take down Octavo and his 4 champions to reclaim Hyrule Castle and stop Ganon. While doing so, you'll find yourself stabbing, slicing, digging, swimming, and hopping your way through the many regions familiar to the series. The world is your dance floor, but you and everything else can only move to the beat, so long as monsters are nearby. It's like a turn-based game, but everything's happening in real time. You start the game as Cadence, who shares similar weapons to Link. Cadence can use daggers, broadswords, spears, flails, and shovels. Unlike normal digging shovels, these are used for beating the living crap. They're just weapons that work like a sword. Also, Cadence and Link share a shield as a means of defense. Link can use short swords, broadswords, spears, flails, and greatswords. Seems like this Link played Breath of the Wild quite a bit. Link's special is his trademark spin attack that can take out foes all around him, but must be charged and executed on beat. Zelda can use daggers, short swords, spears, flails, and rapiers. She uses Naira's protection as a means of defense. Her obtained special is Din's Fire that creates a controllable magic ball that can be blown up at will. Some of these weapons make a reappearance from Crypt of the Necrodancer, while others are completely new. Daggers and short swords attack the space directly in front of the player. Broadswords and shovel attacks cover the tile spaces in front and diagonal to the player. Spears and rapiers have an attack reach up to 2 spaces ahead of the player. Longswords cannot be used with shields. Instead, the shield button is used to hold out the sword that covers about 2 spaces ahead. Changing direction while doing so will swing the sword, taking out enemies in its path. Treasure chests can be found throughout the map. They come in various colors with varying significance. Red chests can hold gear like boots, torches, arrows, bombs, and more. Blue chests often hold important items like heart pieces, high-value rupees, and weapons. Purple chests have a tendency to hold rare weapons, heart pieces, if not very high-value rupees. Caves often hold chests and hordes of enemies within a labyrinth for you to explore. Sometimes, you may find a mini-boss waiting for you within, such as Lynels or an armored Stalfos. Mini-bosses are spread across the map as well and hold all kinds of neat loot upon defeat. Careful not to lose all of your hearts doing so, otherwise you'll end up in a strange realm inhabited by the same old lady that offers potions in Hyrule. Her talks about fate give off the Velvet Room vibes for my Persona players out there. In this room, you can get items in exchange for gem currency, so you can jump right back in with some helpful gear. For example, this will negate the need for you to go out of your way for a torch or other tools. Much like Crypt of the Necrodancer, the world is your dance floor. Enemies all move to the beat. Projectiles and bombs move when the player moves, if not to the beat. It's sort of like a real-time turn-based system. Each move requires you to plan the next with consideration to the terrain and how your enemies move and attack. The only downside to this system is that things can get chaotic when you're overwhelmed by enemy numbers, so use your resources wisely. The 4 instruments are guarded by Octavo's 4 champions respectively. They're needed to take down the barrier around Hyrule Castle and confront Octavo. As any Zelda game, these 4 champions possessing the instruments are holed up within their dungeon. I find it to be a nice touch that the bosses actually play the instruments as weapons. The concept of Zelda and instruments having key roles runs deep within the series. For example, Majora's Mask, Link's Awakening, heck, Link even played a harp in Skyward Sword. Side note, I find it kind of funny instruments don't have a story-influencing role in Breath of the Wild. Instead, Link has a book. Which would you rather have? A book of spells or a magic instrument that can control time? Let me know what you think below. Time for the roundup. After beating all of the champions and collecting their instruments, Cadence and Link take on the main antagonist, Octavo, in a stylized rhythm battle that requires the player to make effective use of a special button. Stepping on this button will switch you between Zelda and Link. Link is invulnerable to green attacks, and the same applies to Zelda when dealing with purple attacks. It comes off feeling a little gimmicky, since it's unique to Hyrule Castle, but it does encourage the player to learn characters they may have invested less time in. It wasn't until my 3rd playthrough with a friend I started to appreciate how powerful Zelda's lunge with the rapier was. If you played her in Smash Bros., her Din's Fire works similarly in terms of moving it before detonation. After necrodancing through a 4-story dungeon gauntlet with no breaks and a few potions handy, Link, Zelda, and Cadence reached the BBEG, Ganon. It turns out that Octavo's true aim was to find champions capable of defeating Ganon. Unfortunately, his execution was quite questionable, but our 3 heroes won't rest until Hyrule is safe. The Ganon boss fight is quite tame. You free your allies from imprisonment. In my playthrough, bombs seem to be the most effective method. Once together, you control all 3 characters at once. It's sort of like a throwback to 4 Swords, controlling the many Links -1 in formation. At the climax of battle, the 3 use the power of the Triforce to seal Ganon, putting a stop to his plans of taking over Hyrule. After the battle, Zelda and Link thank Cadence for her aid, and work together to send her back using the power of drumroll, friendship, the Triforce. She receives her wish and is transported from their world. The ending gives the idea Cadence may have landed somewhere completely unintended, a great premise for another possible crossover in the Necrodancer series. With that, the game ends, showing you some cool game stats and speedrunning leaderboards. Some other modes Cadence offers is an endless dungeon run for those interested in the classic style of gameplay without the need for an overworld or storyline. The co-op option means that you can throw your friend a Joy-Con or controller and play through the game's entire story. Me and Charles, who you may know from the channel, had a blast playing the game from start to finish in a single sitting, only clocking in about 5 hours collecting all of the major items and weapons. Making plans around bosses and solving puzzles with someone else in the Zelda game is a one-of-a-kind experience. Cadence of Hyrule is no exception, with its constant rhythm action and rewarding teamwork. Octavo's mode takes place in an alternate story as he sought out the 4 champions. It plays a lot like the main game. I have to hand it to the team. For an entirely new character, Octavo's design is really fitting for this particular crossover. Octavo is the main protagonist in this story who uses his loot to attack enemies adjacent to him. He also has 2 unique specials, one of which lets him ignore the beat briefly, which may be a reference to the bard in Crypt of the Necrodancer named Octavian, a playable character for those who wanted to play the original game without their movements being at the mercy of the beat. His other special lets him shoot a trinity of purple fireballs that damage enemies. Octavo's story is somewhat unique and doesn't seem to coincide with Cadence's at all. Rather, he defeats the 4 champions with no success of finding one worthy of preventing Ganon's release. When he reaches the Dark World, he finds not Ganon, but a familiar big bad evil guy from the Crypt of the Necrodancer series. Altogether, his story makes a nice add-on that has more or less the same gameplay, with the addition of a new protagonist, storyline, and final boss. It's free, and really shows that the devs really enjoyed making Cadence of Hyrule. Buckle up, we're getting into the heart of the review now. Starting out in the game, I died many times, maybe even 20 times before finding my first dungeon. But as I got more heart containers and obtained more weapons, the overwhelming enemies in the overworld became more bearable. For those who've played Crypt of the Necrodancer and Cadence of Hyrule, the first difference between the two is the style of play. You have an overworld as opposed to a hoverworld, and dungeon crawling has been minimized to spread out dungeons. When you die, you can pick up at any Sheikah stone that you've previously activated, and you don't lose your maximum hearts or weapons when you reach a game over. That said, Cadence of Hyrule is undeniably easier since it lacks the arcade style that Crypt of the Necrodancer was known for. Despite the game being an easier sibling to the previous game, there's plenty of challenges and opportunities offered to the player, such as leaderboards for speedruns and steps taken, as well as a daily challenge mode that lets you go through an endless dungeon until you drop. There's tons of replayability and challenge, whether you're a casual player or one looking for a game to test their reflexes. Looking back, Cadence of Hyrule is your typical lighthearted tale that incorporates foreign characters nicely into a non-canon spin-off of a beloved series. It's clear that those who worked on this game knew Zelda and what makes it fun, especially considering that the devs worked closely with Nintendo to make this game what it is, and the final product speaks. If you love the kick-ass legacy of Zelda music with classic themes and rhythm-based gameplay, I've got a few words for you. Play it. This game is fun, challenging, easy on the eyes, a pleasure to play with friends, and comfortable to play handheld with headphones on. Cadence of Hyrule gets my category ranking of a leisure play with an experience rating of 88%. Thank you for tuning in to IGO.